Welcome. This is Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute. I'm Jonathan Hesson, and in today's edition, we're going to focus on a long variety of issues. We will speak some philosophy, potentially, some history pertaining to the Islamic Republic of Iran. What is actually behind its belligerence throughout this region? And beyond that, what is the situation on the Lebanese front? What is the situation on the Gazan front? To do all that and much more, I'm delighted to welcome Major General in Reserve, Gilshana Cohen, formerly the commander of the defense colleges in Israel, as well as an Army Corps commander, and of course, all the way, usually across the pond, today here in Jerusalem, Dr. Mike Duran, the director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East and a senior fellow at Hudson Institute, and of course, formerly you served as a senior director at the National Security Council for the MENA region, namely Middle East and North Africa. And with that, I'd like to start with you. Mike, when we're looking at the broad scheme of things, it's quite clear to everyone in the know that Iran is behind everything. It is fueling, it's directing, it is strategizing, but it's also in a position where it wouldn't want to be at this point in time. War is fluid. It didn't expect to be put between the rock and the hard place. What can you say or characterize to clearly define the current state of play?
Well, thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be here, and it's great to be here in person with General Cohen. I'm a great fan, and it's wonderful to be here and with him in person. I think the hanging over everything right now is the arrival of Donald Trump. And one thing I think that's clear to everyone, to the Israelis and to the Iranians, is that Donald Trump is going to be more instinctively pro-Israel than the Biden administration was, and he's also going to be more instinctively anti-Iran. And we have an American policy of pressure coming, but we don't know what that pressure is going to look like. And in particular, we don't know what the military component of the pressure will be. It will likely be, I think, from past experience with Donald Trump, it will likely be economic in nature. He will lead with the economic instrument. But then the question is, what will the military component be? And I suspect that the Iranians, seeing that, are starting a whispering campaign. I don't have a lot of evidence on this, but when I worked at the White House, this is in 2006, we were moving the nuclear file from the IAEA to the Security Council. The Iranians didn't want to see that happening, and they started a very effective whispering campaign, telling everyone that they were friends with, who was also friends with us or had a channel to us, that if we would just sit down and negotiate with them, person to person, straight at the table, directly with them, everything was negotiable and everything was soluble, and that they were very reasonable and we had shared interests and so on. It was an extremely effective campaign. And I would be shocked today, given the fact that they have been, their air defenses have been destroyed by the Israelis, and they are vulnerable to a very serious Israeli attack. I would be shocked if they aren't sending all manner of statements of peaceful intention to the Trump team in the hopes of wrapping the Americans into a negotiation, knowing that Donald Trump has many other priorities on his agenda other than just the Middle East, in order to buy time. That's my best guess as to what's going on right now.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to ask you, General Cohen, since much of what we see today evolved after Israel launched Operation Wavesbreaker, which sought to eradicate Iran's growing influence in Judea, Samaria, particularly northern Samaria, utilizing both the Iranian proxy of Afghan volunteers, Liwa Fatimiyun, alongside the Iranian proxy of Pakistani volunteers, Liwa Zainibiyun, in the area of Al-Bukamal, smuggling weaponry and other illicit materials into through Jordan, utilizing the Muslim Brotherhood's crime syndicates there in order to penetrate the state of Israel and then deliver it particularly to the Islamist Hamas, but also in order to utilize its local agents, namely Palestinian Islamic Jihad, to buy clans and to convince them to turn into their sphere of influence. Israel was too effective, which triggered, of course, the October 7th massacre because Hamas wanted to alleviate pressure on its people in the northern Samaria area and hoping to do so by some sort of effective attack against Israel. They did not expect what ultimately culminated. And of course, the next day, on October 8th of 2023, we saw Hezbollah getting the green light from Iran to join the fight in order to split the IDF into two forces. Initially, we had Division 98 on the northern front. We saw the various divisions, particularly 162, entering the northern Gaza Strip after 2 to 3 weeks of clearing the home front from residents or from the remnants of the terrorists who managed to infiltrate Israel. And all of that evolved into a situation where Iran gradually but surely started to employ its Qasem Soleimani strategy of various proxies in various territories, establishing the rings of fire, so to speak, around the state of Israel, including around other partners and allies of the United States in the region. And they have been effective for the majority of the past year, except for the Gaza Strip. Nevertheless, now we've come to a point where Lebanon is on its knees, the Islamist Hamas are on their knees. We're seeing the Iraqis, despite escalating the launches of unmanned aerial vehicles, also very deterred from launching a full-scale attack against Israel, despite Iranian aspirations maybe to do so from Iraqi territory. And Ansar Allah, despite being very vocal, now Turkey is coming into the picture and saying, hey, you targeted one of our commercial vessels, we're coming to deal with you. I do ask myself, where are the Egyptians in this whole story, since they are the founding fathers, alongside the Americans, of Task Force 153 that was supposed to deal with this issue at the get-go. Nevertheless, they are dealing or focusing on the Ethiopian front at this moment. What can you tell us from, again, a broad perspective? Trump administration is coming in. The Iranians are preparing on the diplomatic sphere, as Dr. Duran mentioned. What is happening on the ground?
Actually, we can come to explore all the details of what's going on in the battlefield, and there is a lot to say. But maybe it is better at that point to rise up with a contemplation about the whole meaning and what is really under stake with the whole phenomena of the Iranian Qasem Soleimani vision. Everyone is familiar today with the idea of Qasem Soleimani to surround Israel with a ring of fire. Physically, it came to be very understandable for everyone because we can understand what it means. Fire, launching rockets from Lebanon, from Hamas in Gaza Strip, from Houthi in Yemen, etc. But we must pay attention to the very deep motivation behind. And this motivation behind must get attention of all the Western world. The main idea of Qasem Soleimani was not just to arrange a cluster of well-formed, equipped military organization. The main factor is that they are all guided by the spirit and logic of jihad. Actually, now the debate, and it is not only a debate, it is a kind of considerations that making a difference between Egypt, Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the others, that they are not following jihad. And Qasem Soleimani succeeded to create a cluster of mujahideen, brought it from the inspiration of Abdullah Azam from Afghanistan. Why it is so important? Because those who are guided by jihad could really recognize that they fail in battlefield, as happened to Hamas, as happened to Hezbollah, and yet what they are saying that after every warrior of jihad, whether he is killed, it is like an olive tree, 10 other young trees are rising up. It means it is open-ended. Another idea is that about the day after, they don't have a real day after. The real day after is that something really changing the whole logic of the people regarding the basic consideration whether they want to follow the war or not. What they have in mind is something different. Their calculation about the day after is maybe they are making Hudna or not. And Hudna is just breakdown. And Hudna means that they are not giving up even a millimeter of their basic dream and vision. It means the vision is strong, and it means also about an agreement in Lebanon, as long as Hezbollah is still strong and capable to get support by Iran, maybe they will accept a ceasefire and agreement, but immediately they will think about the new opportunity how to demolish Israel. It means that right now, with all that arrangement, Israel and the Western culture are really under a threat.
It's very interesting since last week we heard Naim Qassem, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, temporary Secretary General, many say here in Israel, he came out and said, our path is a path of mukawama, of resistance.
And we know, just to translate it to the word resistance, making a failure, because speaking about resistance, bringing to the mind the idea that they are like resistance in France.
Which is not the case.
The German went from France, all the resistance warrior came back home, left their weapon beside, and came to normal life. The idea of al-Muqawama, it means dedication for an open-ended warfare.
Right. And it is within context of jihad, as you said, because they believe, as in the 12er Shiite Islam, of course, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is the interlocutor, so to speak, from their perspective or religious perspective, to the hidden Imam, Muhammad al-Mahdi, the 12th Imam within that context that they believe will ultimately, once they conquer Jerusalem and Israel, will sit from the city that we're currently in and rule the world. So obviously, this is a change of theology from Turkey, from Saudi Arabia, from others that do not believe in that. They do not also see Jerusalem in the same light, but there are substantive differences. And we actually share a friend from Turkey who told me when he speaks about the Shiite Islam or the Shiite jihad in Turkey, they said, oh, we didn't think about it that way. You know, so there is a certain perspective that there is a lot of disinformation, a lot of campaigns that the Iranians are employing very effectively throughout the region, throughout the world, but the reality on the ground is still very dire. Let's speak a little bit about the defensive measures of the State of Israel. Of course, dealing with the Lebanese file, there are ongoing negotiations, even as Prime Minister noted, if an agreement is agreed upon today, tomorrow, that agreement might be rendered null and void since the Iranian proxy Hezbollah is bound on this path of resistance and is very keen on utilizing, as General Cohen noted, the moment of opportunity that will once again arise to once again attack Israel.
And just say in a remark, that week I gave a presentation to a group from Canada, Federation of Jews, their leaders, it was not easy at all to listen to me because they told me, if we are following your explanation, we are losing hope.
Jonathan, before I answer your question about Lebanon, can I just respond to some of the things that were said here? Because I think it's really important and doesn't get emphasized enough that when we say mukawama, when the Iranians talk about mukawama or any other element in the Middle East, they're not just talking about resistance or opposition to Israel. It's to the West in general. Right. And in that framework, in that mindset, Israel is an outpost of Western civilization in the Middle East, and it's an affront. Its very existence is an affront to Islam. It's a terrible insult in a sense because in this worldview, I'm saying, Israel is the nation of the Jews, who are a small, traditionally, historically, a small and weak people who have been elevated above the Muslims by the West. And so we need to understand that. I'm not saying that every Muslim sees the world this way, not at all, but that is the ideology that we are up against. And we need to understand it, and we need to fight the war and the ideology. Our policy needs to be aware of that, and unfortunately it isn't. The Biden administration from the beginning defined this as an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it took an ambivalent position, saying that on the one hand, yes, Israel was attacked horrendously on October 7th, but on the other hand, the Israel is suppressing Palestinian nationalism to some extent, and the answer here, the solution, is a two-state solution. That will bring a solution to the war here. And it's a complete misunderstanding of what's going on, because what Iran is doing is organizing all of the elements of its alliance, which exists all throughout the Arab world, against Israel and the West. So we need to work against that. And unfortunately, we've seen, if we go back from October 7th until now, we see that this that across the Middle East, in all of in Turkey and in all of the Arab countries, this feeling of resentment toward the West exists. And under the right conditions, it can grow and become stronger. And so we see that the policy of the Turks has hardened, and we can see that the policies of the Saudis has hardened. Even though the Saudis have moved in a nationalist direction,
they're in tune with their people.
They're in tune. They have to be in tune with their people. So by the United States, by failing to understand that this is an attack against it and against its interest and its position in the Middle East, and not just an attack against Israel, it has actually been strengthening the Iranian position. Iran, for the first time ever, has put all of the elements of its resistance axis, its mukawama axis, in support of the global ceasefire movement. And the United States, up until now, has been negotiating with the Israelis on that basis. It's been saying, if we can get a ceasefire in Gaza, then all of the other fronts will also go quiet. How do we know that? Because that's what the Iranians are telling us. So our diplomacy inadvertently strengthens the Iranian approach. What we should be doing is trying to divide all of the different arenas, treat them all separately, and have Israel prevail in each one of them.
Absolutely. General Cohen?
Really, we must pay attention to study Iran approach of Shia. And there are a lot of options to try to study it deeply. Actually, we are not doing that. For example, in the time of Ahmadinejad that was president, Larijani was his foreign minister. They participated every week in a seminar in Qom about the writings of Heidegger. What they are really trying to find in Heidegger, not just that he was a Nazi supporter and therefore they are studying him, it is simplistic. What they are finding in Heidegger is that he is presenting the most radical criticism against the idea of enlightenment. And that's exactly what they want. It means that they want the whole achievements of the West regarding engineering, scientific, new breaking through, but not in a package deal with the idea of enlightenment. Enlightenment, it means that we are all wishing to one dream, to unite all people in the universe, because human being accepted to be universal according to his rationality, and they are trying to build an alternative rationality. Not that they are not rational, they are building another measurement of rationality. It is a very important lesson, that it is not just a philosophy lesson. It is a lesson to understand their whole approach to reality and to the West.
Very important indeed. I'm going to revert back to the Lebanese front. Go ahead.
Yeah, I deflected you from there. Well, it looks like we're very close to a ceasefire in Lebanon. I don't know whether we will actually see one or not. I think the Iranians are sending signals clear signals that they would like one. For the reason I think that I said, they realize they have been severely weakened by Israel's successes in Gaza, in Lebanon, and against Iran.
Is this right, though, from Israel's perspective, to do it at a time when last week we had Deep Dive, and you and both Mr. Ezra Cohen brought the same equation into the picture? In a month and a half, we're going to have a much more pro-Israeli administration in Washington, or bit more than a month and a half, but nonetheless, it's going to be a reality in which Israel could dictate the terms and conditions of the enemy surrender. Now we're actually giving it a lifeline.
Well, there are a couple of different possibilities. There are things that we don't know here. We don't know what the Trump incoming. We don't know if there is a clear signal being sent from the incoming Trump administration to the Israeli government. And if there is if a signal is being sent, we don't know what that signal is. That's number one. Number two, the Israeli government is under conflicting pressures right now. It very much wants to bring home the people from the north who have been dislocated from been driven out of their homes by the rocket and missile fire from Hezbollah. The military is tired. And it also recognizes that the military cannot occupy all of Lebanon in the way that it has occupied all of Gaza. And so Hezbollah will maintain the ability to shoot rockets, missiles, and drones from areas north of the Litani or from the Bekaa Valley and still hit Israel. So under those conditions, maybe it's better to have a ceasefire, to recuperate, to gain some strength, to start afresh with the Trump administration. And they may also calculate, we don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me to find out that Prime Minister Netanyahu calculates that the way to really end this war is by hitting Iran directly. And so let's start the negotiation with the Trump administration, not about all these different fronts, but about what do we do to actually go after Iran directly, go after the head of the octopus rather than the tentacles. But this is a lot of supposition here because there's a lot of information that I don't have.
General Cohen, in most of my conversations, the reality in which Israel could potentially launch a unilateral attack against Iran, a full-fledged attack against Iran, is not necessarily in the cards. Not at least at this point in time. The Iranians need to be very dumb, pardon my French, in their calculations to go after Israel right now directly. As Dr. Duran also mentioned, the majority of its S-300 systems have been taken out. It's only left with a couple of domestically made surface-to-air capabilities, which are not a threat to Israel's aerial superiority. What needs to drive, though, Israel to a point to say, okay, their nuclear infrastructure is something that we need to deal with, and it is worth to establish air dominance in Iran in order to make sure that this is taken out?
Actually, Israel can do a lot in Iran, but not to follow an ongoing attacks, to repeat it again and again. It is beyond the Air Force Israeli capability. Therefore, it is so important to get the support of Iran, and the Iranian immediately considered that change, that Biden administration stood behind Israel after the last attack.
Support of the United States, that is.
Yes, they supported Israel.
Right.
It was a very important factor in the whole calculation, and of course, the Trump victory in the election really took another serious considerations in the regime in Iran. But yet one thing we must emphasize. We cannot achieve what was achieved against Germany, unconditional surrender. Not from Iran, it could be achieved with the United States, and not from Hezbollah, maybe from Hamas. Therefore, Prime Minister directed to go on in the fighting in Gaza. But regarding the whole operation of IDF in Lebanon, is not going to unconditional surrender. It is beyond the whole expectations.
Of course, with the limited support from the United States and the constraints established on Israel, it cannot go against Hezbollah to the point of unconditional surrender, since the operational activities right now do not indicate Israeli intentions to do so. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Cohen and Dr. Duran for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. This has been Deep Dive featuring Hudson Institute. Until our next edition, from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a good day. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.